The Civil Rights Act of 1964, that over segregation publicly places and prohibited employment discrimination on the idea of race, color, religion, sex or national origin, is taken into account one amongst the crowning legislative achievements of the civil rights movement. Initially projected by President John F. Kennedy, it survived robust opposition from Southern members of Congress and was then signed into law by Kennedy's successor, Lyndon B. Johnson. In subsequent years, Congress expanded the act and passed extra civil rights legislation like the Ballot Rights Act of 1965. Led up to the Civil Rights Act following the warfare, a trio of constitutional amendments abolished slavery, the 13th Amendment, created the erstwhile slave folks voters, 14th Amendment, and gave all men the proper to vote notwithstanding race, 15th Amendment. Nonetheless, several states, particularly within the South, used poll taxes, acquisition tests and alternative measures to stay their African Americans basically disfranchised. They additionally implemented strict segregation through Jim Crow laws and condoned violence from supremacist teams just like the atomic number 104 Klux FTO. For decades once Reconstruction, the U.S. Congress didn't pass one Civil Rights Act. Finally, in 1957, it established a civil rights section of the Justice, together with a Commission on Civil Rights to analyze discriminatory conditions. 3 years later, Congress provided for court-appointed referees to assist black folks register to vote. Each of those bills were powerfully patterned all the way down to overcome Southern resistance. When John F. Kennedy entered the White House in 1961, he at the start delayed supporting new anti-discrimination measures. However, with protests bobbing up throughout the South, including one in Birmingham, Alabama, wherever police savagely suppressed nonviolent demonstrators with dogs, clubs and hard-hitting fireplace hoses, Kennedy determined to act. In June 1963 he projected far and away the foremost comprehensive civil rights legislation to this point, speech communication. The US will not be totally free till all of its voters are free. Civil Rights Act moves through Congress. Kennedy was dead that Gregorian calendar month in Metropolis, once that new President Lyndon B. Johnson forthwith took up the cause. Let this session of Congress be called the session that did a lot of for civil rights than the last 100 sessions combined, Johnson aforementioned in his American State of the Union address. Throughout discussion on the ground of the U.S. House of Representatives, Southerners argued, among alternative things, that the bill unconstitutionally taken individual liberties and states' rights. In a mischievous decide to sabotage the bill, a Virginia segregator introduced a modification to ban employment discrimination against ladies. That one passed, whereas over 100 alternative hostile amendments were defeated. In the end, the House approved the bill with nonpartisan support by a vote of 290 to 130. The bill then enraptured to the U.S. Senate, wherever Southern and border state Democrats staged a 75-day filibuster, among the longest in U.S. history. On one occasion, legislator Robert Byrd of American State, a former atomic number 104 Klux FTO member, spoke for over 14 consecutive hours. But with the assistance of sub-rosa horse trading, the bill's supporters eventually obtained the common fraction votes necessary to finish discussion. One amongst those votes came from California legislator Claire Engel, who, although too sick to talk, signaled "I" by informed to his own eye. Lyndon Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Having broken the filibuster, the Senate voted 73 to 27 in favor of the bill, and Johnson signed it into law on Gregorian calendar month 2, 1964. It is a vital gain. However, I feel we have a tendency to simply deliver the South to the political party for a protracted time to come back, Johnson, a Democrat, supposedly told an aide later that day in a very prediction that will mostly return true. Did you know? President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 with a minimum of 75 pens, that he handed bent General Assembly supporters of the bill like Hubert Humphrey and Everett Dirksen and to civil rights leaders like theologizer King Jr. and civil rights worker. What is the Civil Rights Act? Under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, segregation on the grounds of race, faith or national origin was prohibited. The least bit places of public accommodation, together with courthouses, parks, restaurants, theaters, sports arenas and hotels. Now not may black folks and alternative minorities be denied service merely supported the color of their skin. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act barred race, religious, national origin and gender discrimination by employers and labor unions, and created an Equal Employment Chance Commission with the facility to file lawsuits on behalf of aggrieved staff. Additionally, the Act forbade the utilization of federal funds for any discriminatory program, approved the Workplace of Education, now the Department of Education, to help with faculty group action, gave additional clout to the Commission on Civil Rights and prohibited the unequal application of ballot needs. Legacy of the Civil Rights Act. Civil rights leader theologizer King Jr. aforementioned that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was nothing but a second release. The Civil Rights Act was later expanded to bring disabled Americans, the old and ladies in body athletics below its umbrella. It additionally made up the approach for two major follow-up laws, the Ballot Rights Act of 1965, that prohibited acquisition tests and alternative discriminatory ballot practices, and therefore the Honest Housing Act of 1968, that prohibited discrimination within the sale, rental and finance of property. Although the struggle against racism would continue, legal segregation had been delivered to its knees within the U.S.